Hello and welcome back to another Fear the Walking Dead video, and today I'll be reviewing Season 8 Episode 10, Keeping Her Alive. And this episode is about Madison trying to put Alicia to rest, and it really evolves around Troy's daughter Tiffany and all these different forces trying to get Tiffany for their own benefit. And that was a cool idea in this episode, to have all these people wanting Tiffany. However, it just doesn't play out well, and it really just turns into our characters going off to go talk about Alicia for 45 minutes. That is really the premise of this episode. I really wanted more with other characters hunting down Strand, Madison, and Daniel, who kind of tags along. But all the other characters are just kind of there, and they don't really add anything to the story. I felt like at the start of this episode, we're going to have this big hunting episode. But no, like, Strand gets away with Tiffany, and Dwight and everyone just do not care. You then have Luciana meeting up with Madison, and she doesn't care that she's just compromised her whole, thing. Luciana's like, well, I'm a little mad at you, but yeah, I'll go do what you say. I really disliked the way they treated some characters in this episode. And how Daniel got into this plot was so dumb. The last time Daniel and Madison met, Daniel hated Madison. In this episode, they meet, and Daniel's like, okay, Lucy, I'm going to go with them to find out if they're working with Troy. And it's so dumb why Daniel thinks that, because, Madison and Troy absolutely hate each other. And why would Madison work with Troy suddenly? I get it with Strand, but I thought it was dumb. But once Daniel was in this little group, I felt it was okay. He kind of needed to be there because he's another character which Troy has wronged. And you had a nice scene where you had Troy's daughter being like, oh yeah, your daughter did this, your daughter's a monster. And Daniel kind of stuns her, being like, well, your father killed my daughter by leading a herd of walkers to the settlement that she was trying to defend. I liked that little scene. I'm going to have to say something about Strand. I don't know how to feel. This episode is really annoying me with Strand. Strand's been really annoying me these last episodes. This episode starts with Strand now suddenly being in charge of Padre. I do not like how it seems like everyone kind of dipped out of Padre and another prefects decided to be their own leader. And it was literally, Strand walked in with all his little German friends and they just took over. That's how it feels it was like, and all the Germans are now running it all. And I just feel like the people at Padre, there's just not only kids, there will obviously be some adults there. We saw there are some adults at Padre, there'll be some parents. Why would they be like, whoa, why are you coming in with this child that you abducted, and why are you calling the shots? I thought it was dumb how Strand suddenly called the shots. And one good thing about June, Dwight and Sherry, they quickly kick him out and they're like, okay, we're going to get rid of you and get rid of Tiffany because that was dumb. I liked that. And then you have Strand being selfish, and the way they say Strand is in this episode, they haven't been like he's not that man that he used to be, and this episode's really about everyone trying to better themselves, but Strand is acting like what he used to be. He's been selfish. He's going to be sent away to die, and instead of being like, okay, I'll die so that other people can survive and Tiffany can go back to her father, I'm going to compromise Padre and run off with Tiffany and then go find Madison and be like, oi, she knows where Alicia is. I just didn't like that. The setup for this episode is really, really sucky. And once you get past the setup, which is bad, you get Madison, Strand, Tiffany and Daniel heading westward. And it confused me a little with the geography, because apparently they're going somewhere snowy and they're going somewhere west. But then it still looks like they're filming in the same location. I'm a bit confused how far west they went, but they must be close enough to still be within radio range to Troy. And I'm like, okay, are they still in Georgia? And if they're still in Georgia, does Georgia snow this time of year? Because you look at the trees and I'm like, okay, it could be maybe October. It's a bit confusing when this takes place in the year. And if they're saying it takes place about the same time as the ending of The Walking Dead, I'm pretty sure that ends about it ends in the springtime. So why are we getting this snowy area? The geography just makes no sense. It feels like they're just like, we want a snow episode, and it doesn't make sense because you have Georgia and it's maybe spring. Everything about the location and the snow just doesn't make sense with the timeline and how everything is working in this episode. But getting past that, once you have those three characters at this horde, you get to see this cool scene where we get to see that the walkers apparently have been following Troy since Mexico, or at least Texas. So that's quite cool. Troy has this army of the dead just kind of chilling in the snow area until he needs them. We find out that Troy's not using the living to take over Padre. His plan is to defrost the walkers and use the army of the dead, which is quite cool. We knew he was going to bring the walkers in somehow, and it's cool that apparently he found a freezer in Georgia to freeze all the walkers until he needed them. But the whole point of going to this area was to go and put Alicia down, but it turns out, yeah, it's not Alicia, even though the woman had a missing arm, and apparently that was Tiffanys mum. So does that mean that Troy's, wife or girlfriend died and he cut off her arm to look like Alicia? That sounds so dumb and sadistic, if so. That's so dumb. I really hate this thing they keep doing, is Alicia alive, is Alicia dead? And with the scene where it's like, oh, it's Alicia. Well, no, it's Tiffanys mum. And now we know that Tiffanys mum is not Alicia. So that theory I had with her being a Clark is basically out of the window, because apparently her mum is just some random character that apparently Madison's the reason for her death, because Madison had the saying, no one's gone until they're gone. It makes no sense, and it's really pulling at straws that Madison is the cause for this woman's death. I thought that reveal was absolutely dumb. And the only good thing about this whole kind of plot of going off to go and find Alicia's corpse, which they never found, was that Madison was like, well, I've had enough of you, Tiffany. Let's kill her. And Daniel's like, yeah. And I liked that because it was a little glimpse at these characters were not meant to be good characters. Like, the original plan for Dave Erickson was to have these characters turn into villains, and the only real good characters in the original plan of Fear was meant to be Madison's children, Nick and Alicia. So it was good to see Madison do this very evil thing, and it was to go and kill this child. And then you have the scene, Deus Ex Machina, with Strand and his Alicia clones behind him, stopping them. And then what really annoyed me is that the child runs off, and Strand promised Troy that he would go and bring Tiffany back. But then Strand's like, yeah, let's all head back to go see Lucy and all them. That really annoyed me. So they saw this child who's tied up run off into the woods surrounded by walkers, and they're like, yes, let's go and leave leverage somewhere off in the woods surrounded by walkers. That annoyed me. Now let's move over to the Strand aspect, because that's where all this Alicia stuff, and the episode is titled as Alicia, Keeping Her Alive, and this is where we get the confirmation that Alicia is in fact dead. I know a lot of people were theorizing Alicia is alive, but no, Troy wasn't lying. You have Tiffany also saying she's dead, and then you have these people that dress up like Alicia to keep on the memory of Alicia, and apparently in the 7 years, Alicia turned into this, apocalypse hero where she'll go from town to town and right the wrongs and save people. And that sounds amazing. It'd be cool if we saw all this happen, but apparently after the end of season 7, Alicia became a massive hero, and you have these characters in the SWAT van, which apparently is still running after 12 years, and they're dressed up like Alicia because they want to be Alicia and make people believe the legend of Alicia Clark is still around. And I definitely think the purpose of this episode was to beat it over our heads that Alicia is in fact dead, even though we don't see her body, which is really annoying because this episode sets up another episode for Madison where she's going to go and find Alicia again. So it makes this episode absolute filler and pointless, because episode 11 is about Madison going off to go find Tiffany to go and find Alicia, but because by the end of this episode we find out Tiffany lied and that Alicia's actually over here in some sort of mansion. So looks like the next episode is going to be exactly the same as this one. It just really felt like they want a snowy episode, and they tried to get to 12 episodes. They didn't have enough story for 12 episodes. How about you actually show us some combat for once? Because in this episode, we have yet another scene where all the characters get together, and then we meet back up with them, and the fight happened off screen, and we heard that Troy's men are these absolute badasses, and they couldn't care if they lived or died, and they absolutely destroyed the Padre and Luciana's forces. It'd be cool if we actually saw any combat. in this final season. Every single big fight has happened off screen on Fear, and it just really annoys me because the writers are doing something they shouldn't be doing with storytelling, and they're telling and not showing. We're being told we should fear these characters, this is happening. How about we get shown it so we can actually fear Troy's people? We're getting very little screen time with Troy in this final 6 episodes, because every time he gets into any fight, it's like, oh, Troy got away, it's off screen, this happened. It really annoys me. The only time you ever see fights is because it's one-on-one, or they're just killing a walker here and there. It is very clear there is no budget left in Fear, and if this was the final season, I definitely would have been like, okay, we're going to give you all the money so you can finally tell the story you need to end this show. And it really sucks because it's really annoying me. We have got no big fight scenes in the final season of Fear, and we have 2 episodes left. And now I'm like, okay, now I know why they're doing the CGI walkers for the final episode. It's probably cheaper to copy and paste a walker 1,000 times and have our characters have close-up attacks across the screen, so we don't see anything happening. That's what's probably going to happen. And we're just going to... It's like the end of No Way Out in The Walking Dead, where you had the close-up as all our characters, like, slashing at the camera. That's probably what we're going to get. And that's probably how the walker's going to be killed. It's just going to be really sucky, and I'm really annoyed that we could have had a cool episode with all this combat. We could have had everyone chasing down and having all these battles with characters meeting up and clashing to try and get to Tiffany. But instead we got an episode where they talked about Alicia and how she was this absolute legend and how she is definitely dead, and how we got the snowy point, and apparently next episode is also about hunting down Alicia to go put her to rest because this child lied, and actually we need to go over here, so it's absolutely filler. And one final thing I want to talk about, the timeline's messed up again. In the first half, they say this takes place 12 years into the apocalypse. But in this episode, Madison said the last time she saw Troy, which was at the dam, was 10 years ago. So are they now retconning season 1, 2, and 3 to take place 2 years into the apocalypse? Or did they forget that Fear has been retconned to take place at year 12 and not year 10? It really annoys me, the inconsistency. You're having one character say it's been 12 years, but have another character say it's been 10 years, even though technically Madison is correct. If we get rid of the retcon and go by the original timeline for Fear, it's 10 years in. But it really annoyed me. This episode was all over the place. The pacing was just not very good. I felt like it took too long to set the episode up. And then it was just a lot of talking, and characters felt like they were teleporting around. And then you had the ending, which felt very sudden. And then you have the writing, which is just kind of meh. There's only maybe 1 or 2 bright spots in this entire episode. I am not very happy with this episode. Let's move on to my conclusion. I have to say, this episode is just forgettable. There is no big, amazing moments in this episode, and it leaves a lot to desire. But I'm going to have to give this a 4 out of 10. I can't justify giving this a 5. This is definitely below average for Fear, in my opinion. I would not recommend watching this episode because it seems like episode 11 is going to tell the exact same story of going off to find Alicia. So you could probably skip this episode and just be like, okay, Strand messed around and Tiffany's gone out into the wilderness. But please tell me down below, what did you think about episode 10? Did you like it? Did you hate it? I'd like to know all your thoughts down below. But this is it for me today, so goodbye, peace out, and I'll see you in my next video.